Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for being here today. You know, we live in a world where fear often tries to take center stage. Fear of the unknown, fear of the future, fear of those we don't fully understand. But today I want to challenge you to look at one particular fear that has gripped the most powerful nation on earth. Why the United States fears Iran more than any other nation. You see, this isn't just about politics or headlines or power struggles on the world stage. Deep down, it's about how strength, resilience, and an unyielding spirit can stand taller than the might of any superpower. Iran's history, culture, and sense of purpose remind us that even when you face great pressure, when you face obstacles that seem impossible, you can rise up with your own inner strength. And as we explore this topic together, I believe you'll see that this isn't just a story about nations, it's a story about you. It's a story about refusing to back down. It's a story about how, when you stand firm in your beliefs and embrace your God-given destiny, even the most powerful will take notice. Iran's unwavering national identity is a powerful force that has been shaped over centuries of culture, tradition, and a profound sense of historical purpose. Unlike many modern states that have been formed in relatively recent times, Iran's roots stretch back thousands of years into the very cradle of ancient civilization. This enduring legacy is more than just a source of pride. It is the unbreakable fabric that binds its people together across diverse ethnic, linguistic, and regional differences. Even when faced with foreign invasions, harsh sanctions, and years of political tension, this sense of identity has never wavered. The richness of Persian history, spanning from the grandeur of the Achaemenid Empire to the poetic brilliance of Rumi and Hafez, from the philosophical depths of Avicenna to the artistry of Persian carpets, creates a cultural reservoir that continuously nourishes its national character. This deep connection to the past empowers Iran to face present-day challenges with a unique confidence. Its national identity is not built on fleeting political ideologies or the whims of a single leader. It is rooted in centuries of art, language, literature, and the lived experience of its people. Even as the world around it has changed rapidly, Iran has held on to its sense of self, allowing this identity to evolve without losing its core. That is one of the most significant reasons the United States and other world powers often regard Iran with a kind of cautious respect. They recognize that they are dealing with a nation that cannot simply be reshaped or manipulated, and will because its foundations go too deep. When we talk about national identity, we're also talking about resilience. Throughout its history, Iran has faced waves of conquest and outside interference, from Alexander the Great to Mongol invasions to colonial ambitions, but these forces never succeeded in erasing its cultural heart. Even when political structures collapsed, the people held on to their shared sense of who they were. That historical continuity has created a strong national character that can absorb change without losing its center. This resilience is evident in modern times as well. Economic hardships, diplomatic isolation, and the threat of military action have failed to fracture Iran's self-perception. Instead, they often strengthen it. Every challenge faced has been woven into the national narrative as proof of endurance and determination. This is what unsettles those who would prefer to exert influence over Iran. They realize that they cannot easily divide its people along ethnic, religious, or class lines the way they have been able to do elsewhere, precisely because Iranian identity is so encompassing and so profound. Even among those who may criticize their government or hold different political views, there exists a shared sense of cultural belonging that goes beyond everyday disagreements. It is a kind of identity that is felt in the soul and celebrated in holidays, family traditions, and everyday conversations. That same powerful identity also shapes the way Iranians see their place in the world. They do not view themselves as a minor player or a small fragmented society. Instead, they carry the collective memory of an empire that once ruled from the Aegean Sea to the Indus River. That historical grandeur may no longer exist as a political reality, but it lives on as a cultural touchstone reminder that they come from a lineage of builders, thinkers, and leaders. It informs their sense of dignity and their desire to navigate world affairs on their own terms. When the United States engages with Iran, it is not simply facing a government or a regime. It is engaging with an identity that has survived the test of time. That is why attempts to pressure Iran economically or isolate it diplomatically often produce unexpected results. Far from weakening the national spirit, those pressures tend to activate a deeply ingrained determination to persevere. The more they feel targeted, the more Iranians draw on their cultural wealth and historical memories to sustain themselves. This enduring identity is also reflected in the personal level. Families pass down stories of ancestors who survived wars and hardships. Poems and historical accounts are memorized and recited in schools and gatherings, keeping a vivid sense of identity alive from one generation to the next. Religion, too, plays a role, not as a simple ideology, but as a lens through which to view their history and their moral obligations. Even secular Iranians often draw upon this wellspring of shared tradition when they face uncertainty. That powerful sense of who they are as a people gives them a kind of internal compass that cannot easily be shaken. It reminds them that they have weathered storms before and will do so again. This is the profound, enduring national identity that has allowed IU to navigate centuries of change and challenge, and it is exactly what continues to command attention, and yes, fear from those who might wish to see Iran bend to their will. The United States' fear of Iran is rooted in something much deeper than mere political disagreements or regional rivalries. It is fundamentally a fear of Iran's resilience, especially as it is shaped by centuries of history, culture, and an unbreakable sense of identity. Unlike many countries that can be pressured into making quick compromises or reshaping themselves under outside influence, Iran has proven time and again that its people will not bow easily. This steadfastness is not an accident. It is woven into the fabric of Iranian society and reflects a legacy that cannot simply be bought, bargained with, or bullied into submission. For the United States, which often relies on leverage through economics, diplomacy, or military might to achieve its goals, this is a troubling reality. It is one thing to exert influence over a government that is fragile or disconnected from its own people. It is something entirely different to face a nation whose sense of self cannot be shattered. That cultural strength is especially evident in Iran's long history of facing outside powers. Throughout the centuries, Persian civilization has absorbed invasions and occupations from Greeks to Arabs to Mongols to European imperialists, and has emerged each time with its sense of self intact. Even in the modern era, after the 1953 coup orchestrated by foreign powers, Iranians did not simply acquiesce to outside control. Instead, the seeds of dissent and determination were sown deeper, ultimately producing the revolutionary movement of 1979 that continues to shape Iran's policies and priorities today. That revolution wasn't just about a change of leadership, it was an assertion of Iran's right to chart its own path. The enduring message was that Iranian sovereignty cannot be easily manipulated, and that sense of independence resonates deeply within the Iranian public and its leaders alike. When U.S. policymakers look at Iran, they do not see a nation that can be easily divided by sectarian or regional differences. They see a unified people who may argue among themselves on many matters, but come together when it comes to defending their homeland. This cohesion is especially evident whenever Iran faces threats from abroad. Criticism of the government often takes a back seat as Iranians rally around the principle of self-determination. This is a powerful deterrent that cannot be countered with simple political rhetoric or economic sanctions. The more outside forces attempt to isolate or punish Iran, the more this underlying sense of national pride is activated. Iran's capacity to survive under extreme pressure is something that unsettles even the most experienced strategists in Washington. Despite decades of harsh economic sanctions, diplomatic isolation, and military threats, Iran has found ways to maintain its sovereignty and pursue its strategic goals. This is not simply a matter of luck or stubbornness. It is a reflection of a deeply ingrained resilience that is built into the society itself. From an early age, Iranians grow up understanding that endurance is a virtue and that hardship can be faced without losing one's sense of dignity. That mentality is a formidable source of strength that cannot easily be countered through conventional pressure tactics. The United States fears this resilience because it renders many of its usual tools less effective. Diplomatic isolation is meant to divide, yet Iran's experience of hardship has created a people who can draw closer together in difficult times. Economic pressure is meant to spark discontent, yet for decades Iranians have proven that they can adjust their way of life and persevere even as material comforts grow more scarce. Even military threats often provoke a surge in nationalistic sentiment rather than fear or panic. In short, the United States is up against an adversary that cannot simply be reshaped by external forces. That same resilience also informs Iran's approach to alliances and partnerships. Rather than relying too heavily on any one outside power, Iran has cultivated a web of regional connections and strategic relationships that allow it to navigate international turbulence. This gives Iran an additional layer of security against isolation and reflects a cautious, measured understanding of its place in the world. It knows it cannot rely on the goodwill of larger powers forever, so it has invested in self-sufficiency and long-term thinking as a means of preserving its independence. And perhaps most troubling to U.S. strategists is that this resilience is not a top-down creation imposed by political leaders. It is a broad-based, authentic expression of the Iranian spirit that can be found across society. Even those who might wish to see political reform or modernization rarely do so at the expense of national sovereignty. Even they recognize that Iran must stand strong and independent in a world where power is often taken, not given. In this way, the United States is forced to contend not just with a government or an administration, but with an entire culture that refuses to lose its sense of self. That cultural continuity is Iran's most formidable weapon, and it is the true source of America's concern. It cannot be sanctioned away, diplomatically ignored, or militarily intimidated into submission because it is rooted in a deeper, enduring strength that cannot be measured by conventional means. Iran's strategic importance in the Middle East is one of the most significant reasons why it commands attention and concern on the world stage. Geographically, Iran is perfectly positioned at a vital crossroads where some of the most important energy routes and trade corridors in the world converge. Its long coastline along the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz, one of the most strategic choke points for global oil shipments, gives Iran a powerful leverage over energy security. A substantial percentage of the world's oil must pass through these waters each day, which means that Iran's ability to influence regional stability has direct consequences for economies around the globe. Even the most powerful countries cannot overlook this strategic reality. More than just its geography, Iran's importance lies in its substantial natural resources. With one of the largest proven reserves of oil and natural gas in the world, Iran is not merely a passive player in regional affairs. It is a key supplier with significant potential to shift global energy markets. Even when under intense international sanctions and facing economic hardships, Iran's energy sector remains a critical part of its national power and a cornerstone of its foreign policy. The United States is acutely aware that any disruption in Iranian energy exports or regional instability could cause ripple effects reaching far beyond the Middle East. Additionally, Iran's strategic depth is amplified by its political alliances and regional influence. Its relationships with various non-state actors and allied governments across the Middle East have enabled it to project power well beyond its borders. Whether through Hezbollah in Lebanon, Shia militias in Iraq, or its role in Syria's conflict, Iran has cultivated a network of influence that serves as a counterbalance to American and allied interests. These connections do not simply appear overnight. They have been nurtured over decades with a long-term view that reflects Iran's strategic thinking. The result is that Iran can exert pressure across multiple theaters simultaneously, complicating the United States' strategic calculus. and making direct action against Iran far more dangerous and unpredictable. That regional presence is not limited to military matters alone. Iran also engages economically and diplomatically with neighboring states in ways that the United States cannot easily counter. Many countries in the Middle East and Central Asia rely on trade with Iran to bolster their economies, especially under conditions where they themselves are wary of overdependence on Western powers. Even countries that maintain strong relationships with the U.S. recognize that Iran is too significant to isolate entirely. This is evident in the cautious diplomatic balancing that Gulf states, for example, practice. While they may have tensions with Iran, they also know that dialogue and coexistence are necessary to ensure long-term regional stability. Beyond its immediate neighborhood, Iran's strategic outreach extends into new partnerships with global powers like China and Russia, which further enhances its international standing. These ties offer Iran a counterweight to Western sanctions and military threats and signal that Iran is not alone in its quest for a multipolar world order. The United States cannot simply dismiss Iran as a pariah state. It must contend with the fact that Iran is an important player with real options for trade, military cooperation, and diplomatic support outside of traditional Western alliances. This broad network of relationships provides Iran with resilience and complicates any straightforward containment strategy. When the U.S. thinks about Iran, it cannot view it as just one isolated nation. It must recognize that Iran sits at the center of a larger geopolitical puzzle that affects every other piece. Its leadership understands this well, using its geography and alliances as leverage whenever it faces pressure. Even when its economy is suffering, Iran knows that it holds cards that few other regional powers possess. That is why American planners cannot take Iran lightly or assume that military strength alone will produce compliance. The cost of miscalculating Iran's strategic depth is simply too high. This awareness of Iran's strategic centrality shapes everything from American military deployments to diplomatic initiatives. Even during periods of heightened tensions or when serious considerations of force come into play, U.S. officials must always ask themselves how actions against Iran might balance the balance of an entire region. Whether it is disrupting oil supplies, triggering proxy conflicts across multiple countries, or forcing reluctant allies into new alliances, Iran's influence is felt in ways that cannot be ignored. That is the true heart of America's fear. It is not just the prospect of a nuclear program or rhetoric that fuels public debates. It is the knowledge that Iran's geographical, economic, and political positioning has made it a linchpin of the Middle East and an indispensable player on the global chessboard. Every move that the United States contemplates must take this into account, which gives Iran a persistent and undeniable weight in world affairs that no superpower can simply wish away. Iran's mastery of asymmetric warfare and its far-reaching influence across the region is one of the most significant reasons why it is seen as such a formidable adversary. Unlike traditional military powers that rely mostly on conventional armies, expensive equipment, and direct confrontations, Iran has honed an entirely different and highly effective set of strategies. It understands that in modern conflicts, especially against more technologically advanced foes like the United States, winning does not necessarily mean winning on the battlefield in a traditional sense. Instead, Iran has invested decades into perfecting a form of warfare that thrives on flexibility, innovation, and the clever use of limited resources to achieve disproportionate effects. This asymmetric approach allows Iran to leverage its strengths while minimizing its vulnerabilities. Its Revolutionary Guard Corps and Quds Force are built for irregular warfare, operating in the shadows, developing alliances with local groups across the Middle East, and using indirect means to challenge its adversaries. These groups and relationships give Iran the capacity to exert pressure across multiple countries simultaneously in Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Yemen, and even further afield, creating a dynamic that the United States and its allies cannot easily contain or predict. Iran has built a network of proxies that reflect its long-term strategic interests, supplying them with training, arms, and expertise that enable them to fight on their own terms. This decentralized model means that even if one front is quiet, Iran can still escalate elsewhere, spreading its influence like a web across the region. The effectiveness of this strategy is evident in the way Iran's adversaries have had to continually adjust their calculations. Conventional forces can be tracked, measured, and countered, but asymmetric tactics demand constant adaptation. The US cannot simply defeat Iran by striking its capital or its navy. It must also account for Iran's ability to inspire, support, and coordinate with movements that act independently. This multifaceted approach has shaped conflicts in the region for years, often forcing American commanders into reactive positions rather than proactive ones. Even when American military assets vastly outnumber and outclass Iran's, this advantage is blunted by the elusive, unpredictable nature of proxy conflicts and irregular warfare. Moreover, Iran's mastery of asymmetric warfare is not limited to traditional battlegrounds. It also encompasses cyber capabilities, drone warfare, and a deep understanding of information operations. Iran has proven time and again that it can strike targets far from its borders, as demonstrated by drone and missile attacks attributed to Iranian-backed groups or direct Iranian operations. These tools allow Iran to send strategic messages, whether to adversaries like Saudi Arabia and Israel, or to international audiences at a fraction of the cost that a conventional military action would require. Every time Iran demonstrates these capabilities, it reinforces its reputation as a nimble and resourceful power that cannot simply be cornered or coerced. This mastery of asymmetry is also deeply psychological. It projects an image of an Iran that is capable of responding, no matter the odds, which in turn raises the perceived cost of any direct attack. The United States and its allies must carefully weigh not just Iran's conventional military forces, but its capacity to unleash a cascade of unpredictable retaliatory measures. The knowledge that Iran could mobilize networks across the region to disrupt shipping lanes, sabotage infrastructure, and provoke local militias into action acts as a powerful deterrent. Even when US leaders publicly project strength and confidence, they do so with the full understanding that an outright conflict with Iran could spill over into a much wider and messier struggle. This is part of what makes Iran's strategy so difficult to counter. The United States is an expert in conventional military superiority, but Iran excels in turning its relative weaknesses into strategic strengths. Every American move can trigger a carefully prepared response that is designed to stretch resources, destabilize alliances, and exploit political cracks in the region. Even American partners like Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states must constantly navigate the realities of Iranian influence close to their borders, knowing that a miscalculation could provoke an asymmetric response that could take months or years to contain. In short, Iran's mastery of asymmetric warfare is not just a tactical choice, it is a deliberate and carefully cultivated strategy that reflects its culture of endurance, adaptability, and long-term vision. It has taken decades to craft and perfect, allowing Iran to punch far above its conventional weight and shape conflicts in ways that make it nearly impossible for even the most powerful adversaries to ignore or easily defeat. This mastery lies at the heart of the fear that Iran provokes, an understanding that raw power alone cannot guarantee victory against a nation that knows how to fight smarter longer in ways that upend traditional expectations. Standing firm against pressure has long been one of Iran's most defining traits, and this capacity to endure hardship is a core reason why it commands respect and fear on the international stage. Throughout its history, Iran has repeatedly faced immense external pressures, economic sanctions, diplomatic isolation, military threats, and covert operations, yet has managed to survive and even grow stronger in the face of those challenges. This steadfastness is not a product of chance. It is deeply ingrained in the national character, shaped by centuries of struggle against outside domination. Iranians know what it means to persevere under difficult circumstances, and that resilience has been cultivated into a source of strength that cannot easily be broken by outside forces. When one looks at the modern history of Iran, especially since the 1979 revolution, this enduring spirit is evident at every turn. The years that followed the revolution were marked by the brutal Iran-Iraq War, which tested the resolve of an entire generation. Despite facing a coalition of regional and international powers, Iran fought on for 8 long years, sustaining itself not only with material resources, but also with a fierce commitment to its sovereignty. That war left deep scars, but it also reinforced a national conviction that Iran could prevail, even in the most arduous circumstances. It showed Iranians that endurance was not just a tactical choice, but a vital part of their identity, a lesson that still resonates today whenever they face new waves of pressure. That willingness to stand firm is also evident in how Iran has handled the decades-long campaign of economic sanctions orchestrated by the United States and its allies. Time after time, these measures have sought to cripple Iran's economy, isolate it from the global financial system, and provoke political unrest at home. And while these sanctions have undoubtedly created hardships for millions of Iranians, they have also fostered a sense of self-reliance and ingenuity that continues to surprise outside observers. Iranian businesses, scientists, and entrepreneurs have learned to adapt, innovate, and find alternative paths where conventional routes have been blocked. Every sanction that was intended to force Iran to its knees has instead deepened its capacity for creative resilience, transforming a seeming weakness into a quiet source of power. That resilience is not limited to the state level. Ordinary Iranians have also shown a remarkable capacity to endure, whether through building local industries to offset imports, embracing alternative currencies, or turning to grassroots solutions for everyday challenges. It is this grassroots endurance that truly underpins the nation's fortitude. Even amid difficult times, people find ways to sustain their communities and maintain a sense of purpose, knowing that yielding to outside pressure would mean losing their sense of self. This shared commitment to perseverance is part of what makes Iran's national will so difficult for other countries to overcome. It cannot simply be targeted by striking a single institution or punishing a few leaders, because it is distributed across the society as a whole. There's also a spiritual dimension to this endurance that cannot be ignored. Iran is a deeply religious society, and concepts like martyrdom, sacrifice, and standing up for one's beliefs in the face of hardship are central to its worldview. The memory of historical figures who defended their faith and identity against impossible odds is invoked as a source of inspiration in times of national crisis. This cultural and spiritual inheritance reinforces the sense that endurance is not just pragmatic, it is morally necessary. Even younger generations who may have different political or social aspirations often share a respect for these values, recognizing that Iran's history of standing firm is one of its most defining features. When American leaders attempt to exert pressure on Iran, whether by military posturing, economic restrictions, or diplomatic isolation, they do so, knowing that they are dealing with a society that views endurance as a badge of honor. The calculus is fundamentally different because what might cause another country to retreat or concede often has the opposite effect in Iran. Every time outside powers attempt to coerce or intimidate, they often end up deepening Iran's resolve. That is why the United States, despite its vastly greater material power, has struggled for decades to achieve its goals vis-a-vis Iran. Strength in this context is measured less by tanks or jets and more by a people's capacity to remain unyielding no matter the cost. That enduring resilience complicates every diplomatic and strategic interaction with Iran. It means that time itself becomes a tool in Iran's hands, allowing it to wait out short-lived political cycles in Washington or to outlast sanctions that inevitably evolve into new forms of adaptation. Even major shifts in regional alliances rarely lead to Iran's isolation because it is sustained by this inner capacity to persevere and to leverage hardships as part of its long-term strategy. This is one of the most powerful forces at work in Iran's relationship with the United States, a strength rooted in steadfastness, that cannot simply be diminished or outmaneuvered by outside powers. What we can learn from Iran's example of facing fear with courage and purpose goes far beyond geopolitics or international relations. It speaks to a universal truth about the power of resilience, self-belief, and unwavering commitment to one's principles. Throughout its long history, Iran has repeatedly demonstrated that when a people possess a deep sense of identity and a shared sense of purpose, they can face even the most daunting challenges without losing themselves. That lesson is especially meaningful for those of us who face our own kinds of fears, whether personal, professional, or communal, and must find the strength to persevere despite uncertainty or hardship. One of the most important lessons is that fear itself is not a weakness. It is a signal that something significant is at stake. Iran has never been a stranger to fear. From historical invasions to modern-day economic sanctions and diplomatic isolation, Iranians have lived with a constant awareness that their nation's sovereignty and culture must be defended against formidable outside forces. Yet this fear has never paralyzed them. Instead, it has motivated them to be resourceful and to look inward for the strength they need to overcome. This is a powerful reminder that fear, when acknowledged and embraced, can be a catalyst for growth rather than a source of defeat. That capacity to draw strength from one's fears also reveals another key insight. True courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward despite it. Iran's choices in the face of adversity reflect this understanding. Even when the odds seem stacked against them, they do not simply resign themselves to fate or wait passively for change. They channel their fears into a determination to shape their own future, an attitude that applies just as readily to our personal battles as it does to national struggles. Whether someone is facing a difficult career challenge, dealing with loss, or working to overcome long-standing habits, that same commitment to face fear with purpose can produce real, lasting strength. In this sense, Iran reminds us that facing fear with purpose requires both patience and vision. Time and again, they have demonstrated that enduring hardships over the long term is often more powerful than seeking short-term relief. For those of us who want to grow and succeed in life, that means recognizing that meaningful change rarely happens overnight. It requires persistence, a clear sense of our values, and the willingness to embrace discomfort along the way. Iran's example shows that lasting achievements come to those who can stay focused and remain committed, even when progress is slow or obstacles multiply. We can also learn from Iran's example that facing fear does not mean going it alone. Throughout its history, Iran has relied on networks of support, whether family, community, or like-minded allies to weather its most difficult times. This reminds us that when we face our own fears, we do not have to isolate ourselves or bear the burden in silence. Seeking guidance, leaning on those who care about us, and cultivating supportive relationships can make all the difference between losing hope and holding strong. The connections we build with others often become the safety net that allows us to persist even when fear and doubt grow loud. Perhaps most importantly, Iran's story teaches us that fear can be transformed into a deeper sense of purpose. When Iran's people reflect on the struggles they have endured, they do so with a sense of meaning and dignity, knowing that each trial was part of a larger journey towards self-determination. That is a lesson we can all take to heart. Instead of seeing fear as an obstacle that holds us back, we can choose to see it as an invitation to rise up, to discover inner reserves of strength, and to contribute to something larger than ourselves. In a world where we are often encouraged to take the easiest or most comfortable path, Iran's example reminds us that embracing challenge can reveal who we truly are. Even when circumstances seem difficult and the way ahead is uncertain, we can move forward with confidence if we hold fast to our purpose and allow our fears to inspire resilience rather than retreat. Every trial we face carries within it the potential to deepen our character, to strengthen our resolve, and to shape our future in profound and enduring ways. It is this commitment to face fear with courage and purpose that enables us not only to survive but to grow, to thrive, and to inspire those who come after us.